Hello everyone, it's Jennifer. Today I wanted to do a technique that I haven't done in a few years but I really like. It's called ink embossing folders. It kind of gives a letterpress look, but I'm going to take it one step further today. So you can see here I created 6 backgrounds. Actually I created 8 but only turned 6 into cards. It's hard to tell in the photos, but all of these backgrounds have some great texture to it and some really rich color that kind of goes along with the texture. This is super easy to do. All you need are some good inks and some embossing folders for your die cut machine. Now for the video today, I'm using some new embossing folders from Lifestyle Crafts, who's now part of We Are Memory Keepers. What I liked about these folders is they're 6x6, so you can orient your paper on the card either horizontal or vertical. And this will still fit through most of your die cut machines. I'm going to be using the Big Shot today, but you can use it with your Vagabond or whatever machine you have. Now what I want to do is ink one side of this embossing folder. What I first do is clean it off. Since it's a brand new embossing folder, I just clean it off with a baby wipe just to get it ready to take the ink on. Not sure this makes that big of a difference, but for some reason I think in my head it will, so I'm just doing it. Now I'm going to cover ink on one side of this embossing folder, the side that has all the raised area between the words. So there's lots of flat area on this side. So I am going to use some Simon Says Stamp Sea Glass ink to apply all over the inside of this embossing folder. Now you can try whatever ink you have. However, I have found that the Simon Says Stamp inks, the Hero Arts Shadow inks, and the W+9 inks all work the best because they have the same formulation that kind of absorbs into the paper and slowly evens and smooths over time, which really works with this technique. Again, you can try it with whatever inks you may have, but I've found these work perfectly. So just give it a shot with whatever embossing folders and inks you may have. So now I have inked the inside of that embossing folder. It's hard to see because it's a really light pool color. And I'm going to put my paper in it and be very careful not to let this shift while you take it and put it through your die cut machine. So I have my Big Shot here. I'm going to open it to the tab number 1. Basically, you want to put this through your die cut machine whatever way you normally do an embossing folder. So just do this however you normally do an embossing folder. The way I do mine on my Big Shot is on tab 1. I do the same on my Vagabond too. So I'm just going to roll this through my die cut machine, and when I take it out, you'll see, don't worry, it'll look a little splotchy, but all the ink is in the deep valleys in between the raised words on this embossing folder pattern. Now, I wanted to take this one step further and add some ink to the raised areas too. Again, don't worry that that background hasn't smoothed. I'll talk about that in a minute. What I'm doing is I'm taking a slightly darker ink. This is Surf Blue from Simon Says Stamp. It's another one of those really good formulations. And I'm lightly rubbing this over the raised areas of my paper. So the ink is just catching on those raised areas. So I have a light color in the background and a darker color in the raised areas. And it is so cool. Now this ink is going to be splotchy and uneven at first, but it slowly dries and evens out and gives you good coverage. So you can see that background's already starting to look better. Now there were some spots where the ink didn't completely transfer and I didn't want to push too hard, so I'm using my Fantastics little sponge-like pencil tool to pick up some ink from the ink pad and color it directly in the areas where I need the ink. This is a great tool for fixing up any areas where inking hasn't completely applied or transferred when you did stamping or any kind of technique. And here's the result. You get the light color ink in the valleys and the darker color ink on the raised areas. So I wanted to do a few other color combinations and other embossing folders just to show you how versatile this technique is. So let's go ahead and do this one. This one I think is one of my favorites. I'm going to apply Hero Arts Soft Shadow Ink in the Soft Vanilla color. This is actually one of my favorite colors to apply to the embossing folder. I think it's better if you use a light color on the embossing folder and then a darker color on the raised areas, because this lighter color is a little more forgiving as you're trying to get it to transfer from the embossing folder to the paper. So I just think you get better results, but by all means you can try whatever ink colors that you may have. And I'll show you another option later on in this video where I did a darker color on the folder. I really also like that these embossing folders from We Are Memory Keepers and Lifestyle Crafts have the lines, the grid lines on it, which helps to make sure you get your paper straight. And look at that result. I just love that look. It would be beautiful as is without applying this other color on top of it. Be great for a wedding card, but I decided to add dark quartz, or I'm sorry, the fresh peach color from Hero Arts. Now all of these colors will soften as they dry and also even out and smooth out. So you can see, I even love the back, I think that looks cool. You can see the great results that you get with these colors, and this is what it looks like when it dries. That was one of my favorite ones. But Again, you can try any embossing folders that you may already have and any inks you may already have. Now this is one of my other favorite ones here, the green and green and the chevron pattern. Now you'll notice that with this embossing folder, the area that I am applying the ink to there's a bigger area. So it's going to be harder to transfer all of that ink onto the paper, but we're going to give it our best shot. And you also notice that I first smooth the ink over the surface lightly and then dab it on. I want to be careful not to get any ink in the areas that aren't raised in this embossing folder. So I'm going to go ahead and put my paper in. Again, make sure that it doesn't shift and run it through your die cut machine. Now when I open this, I want to be careful not to get any of the ink from the edges on it. And you'll see it did a pretty good job. This will smooth out and even out, but you'll see some areas there on the bottom the ink didn't transfer completely. That's okay, I'll just use my Fantastics to take some of that ink and fill in those areas. If you don't have this tool, you can try using any pointed object, or take the corner or a point off of a makeup sponge applicator and try that. I just really like these Fantastics because I think they're great tools for things just like this. They're pretty inexpensive too, and I just keep one for every color. Okay, so now I'm going to apply a darker ink, the Simon Says Stamp Green Apple ink, over the raised areas. And I just think this is so cool how these two look together with this embossing folder. I just love the results of it. And I'll show you the finished card in just a moment, but you can see the dimension there. It's hard to pick up the texture in the video camera, but there's great dimension there. Another one that I like is this sunshine background. I love sunshine cards. I think it's a great way to send a cheerful greeting to somebody. So I was thrilled to see this embossing folder. This is one of those you want to be real careful when applying the ink. You don't want the ink to get into the other areas when you're doing this. So be real careful not to push too hard, and just apply the ink to the areas that are raised in the embossing folder. Put your paper in, and this is neat. You could put it so that the center of their sunbeams is kind of off center if you wanted to, but I'm going to put it right in the center. Run that through my die cut machine, and when I take it out, I have the dark area pressed in. So this time I did the dark area on the embossing folder, and so that's the darker area is the deeper area, and I'm applying the softer ink to the raised area. So I'm doing it backwards this time just to show you that it will work okay. Now when I first do this, while this is still wet, it's not going to look so good. It'll look like the two colors kind of blend together, but when they dry, you'll get a nice difference, and you'll end up with a really cool yellow, light yellow and dark yellow background. So here you can see what the final card looks like after it dries. But I think many things in stamping look better after they dry. It just needs a little bit of time. Now another one that I wanted to show you is this one, where I used a really light gray in the background and a blue on the raised area. Now this embossing folder has a lot of surface area right here where I'm applying the ink. This is the Simon Says Fog, which is a super light gray ink that's perfect for this. But notice there is a lot of flat area that I'm applying this ink to. So I think embossing folders like this, you want to use a lighter ink for these backgrounds because it is more forgiving when you're trying to transfer that ink onto it. So when you see after I run it through my die cut machine, I get that background. It's a little splotchy right now, but it'll dry even. Now I'm going to apply an ink, a darker ink over the top, and this is kind of hard just to stay on the raised areas because there's a lot of area between the raised areas. So you'll notice I do actually get some blue ink on the background around the edges, but I think that's okay. If you really want a clean look, you want to be careful to get an embossing folder where the pattern isn't as far apart as these butterflies, but I do think it works out really well. You could actually cut out some of these butterflies and use them as embellishments too, because that raised area is really fun and different. And you can see after it dries, that gray is just beautiful in the background, very subtle. You could use a soft gray cardstock and just run it through embossing folder and rub blue ink over the top, but I really like the look of the two inks applied. So now this is a wood grain embossing folder, which I think is fantastic. I'm going to apply soft sand to the inside of the embossing folder. Now this one has super tiny areas that are raised. This can also be tricky because there's really not enough area to transfer all that ink. So you can see here, right now it doesn't look so hot, but when I do go over and apply the soft brown ink over the raised areas, then it all comes together and it looks much better, and it really looks like a true wood grain background. I think this is a fantastic one. Now I mentioned before that I like the Hero Art Shadow inks and the Simon Says Stamp inks for this. I also like the W+9 inks. These are all dye-based inks that absorb into the paper slowly and give you a nice, smooth, even look. But again, try it with whatever inks that you may already have. Now there's two more that I didn't actually turn into cards, but I wanted to show you. This tree background I thought was fun with the sea glass on the background of the embossing folder and then the soft sand on the raised areas. I thought this would be fun for a Christmas card. You could put some birds on it, anything you want. I actually didn't turn it into a card, but I wanted to show you this option. So you can do colors that contrast, like this blue and this brown. Here's another additional example. I didn't turn into a card, but I did a dark color on the embossing folder. This is Audrey Blue from Simon Says Stamp. And you can see there's a lot of area that I'm trying to transfer the ink here. There's a lot in that background, but I think it turned out okay. It's a little bit splotchy, but it'll get better as it dries. And lime green ink added to the top. So I went really high color here. I think the results are okay, but it just didn't work with the cards I was making. Some of the ink didn't transfer, so again, I used the Fantastics tool to transfer it. So now it's time to show you what it looks like when these have dried. You can see the texture that you get from only an embossing folder, and there's the green on green, which I think is one of my favorites. I think tone on tone like that is fantastic for this technique. The next one is the blue and green one. This is probably my least favorite because there was such big surface area for that dark color, but I still think I'll use it for something. The wood grain, this is fantastic, the texture that you get here with the light browns. Here's the first one that we did with the raised words, and then the sunshine. Remember, it looked like those two yellows were the same color. Well, here you can see that they dried to be two different colors, and you get a great sunshine background. Then the butterflies with the soft gray background that almost looks silvery, and then my favorite, which I think is this cream with the raised peach, and you can see how those colors really smoothed out and give such rich color. So I apologize that this video is going to be one of my longer videos, but I wanted to show you how to pull these 6 cards together. So I'm going to be using a die set from Little Inker. I think this is a fantastic set. It has a bunch of rectangles that cut the rectangle, and it also cut a stitch line around the edge. Now, before I get onto the piece that I'm going to use for this card, I wanted to show you this big die that's included in the set. I love this because it does a faux stitch line around the edge of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece, which is great for the finished edge on a note card. So you can see what it looks like here. It just does this finishing edge. I think that's fantastic. I'm not going to use it on the card today, but I wanted to show you what that looked like. Okay, so back to the card. I'm going to use this rectangle die, the small one that does the faux stitch edge. I thought this would be better than just a piece of white cardstock just cut and kind of floating on the front of the card. So it gives a nice quick finishing touch. Now the stamp set I'm going to be using today is from the Simon Says Stamp card kit for July, but you can buy the stamp set separately. The card kit is fantastic, and I just love these handwritten greetings by my friend Christina. So I'm going to do a variety of embossing powders for the center of these for each of the cards. I've been doing a lot more with embossing powders lately, and I was trying to think of a way to contain the mess, and I came up with this idea of using coffee filters. Instead of doing this over a piece of scrap paper where it can kind of blow around and make a mess, I'm doing it over coffee filters. Then I can kind of funnel it back into the bottle and then just fold up this filter and throw it away. These filters are really inexpensive. I got several hundred of them for like $5. It's nothing. I'll link to it in my description below and also over my blog, but you can get them at any grocery store, and they're very inexpensive and a great way to contain the mess. I've tried glitter trays, but static is always a problem. This just seems to be the perfect thing for me. Now these are embossing powders from Wow, and they have glitter in them, and so you want to mix them up real good, shake them, and then just pour a bunch on top. I'm not using my spoon because I wanted to make sure I got lots of glitter in there, so I'm just kind of pouring it over. Then I can tap all of the powder back into my jar and then throw the coffee filter away. I love these glitter embossing powders, and I'll put links to the actual ones I used below. Now I wanted to have some little embellishments to put on the cards, something simple, so I am going to my handy dandy small heart die from Simon Says Stamp, and I've inked up some paper to perfectly match the background. And I'll add these hearts with just a little bit of glossy accents. You could use the multi-medium that I normally use, the liquid adhesive I normally use, but I wanted to have this glossy accents out also to put a coating on the top to make it look like an embellishment. But first I'm going to add some Wink of Stella shimmer to the hearts, and then cover it again with the glossy accents just to give it a finished look. Now you could put buttons or brads or any kind of embellishment here, but I love to create my own with the die cuts the dies I already have, and these I could perfectly color to match my card. No looking around for the exact match. Now I wanted some silver glitter hearts for some of my cards, so I'm grabbing that silver glitter embossing powder again. I've smushed some Versamark ink over some white cardstock, added the powder on top, and then I'll heat set this. Now you can see how handy that coffee filter is because I'm not blowing the powder around. It all stays contained there until I put it back. Okay, so now that I have this powder covering all of my cardstock, I just run it through my die cut machine with the heart die, and look at, I have those perfect little silver hearts that I'm going to cover with some glossy accents, and they really look cool with that rounded glossy accent on top. Okay, so now let's finish up these 6 cards, and I just wanted to show you how I finished them all up. I used just some simple red on the wood grain background. I thought this would work for a masculine card too. Then we have my favorite one, which I showed you with the peach hearts that perfectly match the background. Then for the sunshine, I decided to use a red embossing powder. It's one from Wow. It's like a red sherbet color. It's kind of got a coral to it. It's just beautiful and a nice pop against that yellow background. And then I used those silver hearts with the glossy accents on top for my 2 blue cards. So there you have it. Sorry the video is a little bit long and that I hurried through some of it to show you all 6 cards. If you're interested in any of the products, they're linked below in my YouTube description. I linked to more than one source, so you have a few different options. And if you have any questions or want to see more, you can go to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and we'll see you again soon.